Hello, and welcome back for another episode of Dial the Gate, the Stargate Oral History Project. My name is David Reed. Thank you so much for joining me. Kent Matheson, Matt Painter for Stargate SG-1, is joining me for this episode. And we've got quite the show for you because we have materials to show you from the evolution of his work and the series. I'm really excited about this one. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Kent Matheson, Matt Painter, Stargate SG-1. Sir, it is a trip to have you. I have been so impressed with so much of your stuff over the years, and this is really a delight for me. So I'm thankful for you being here.
Thanks for the kind words, man. That's nice of you to say.
When did I imagine when you were really little you started doodling? How early on did you know that this is what you wanted to do with your life?
It's sort of never been a question of doing anything else,
Yeah.
art-wise. Yeah. The matte painting and visual effects thing I just kind of fell into, but it's always been an art, direction for me. So
How did you fall into this?
that's a long story. I went to school for fine art and graphic design and sculpture, art stuff, basically. Out of school, I worked as an illustrator for magazines for a while, and then kind of fell into doing graphic design for magazines. Worked for a while in Toronto, Canadian originally, went to school in Toronto. And when we moved to Vancouver, I took a job working for a local magazine. First, it was Adbusters. If anybody
Mm-hmm.
has ever heard of that magazine,
Mm-hmm.
I worked there for a while, which was lovely. And then started working for a local, like professional magazine, and did graphic design for a couple of years. Um, I guess when I got bored or kind of didn't want to do that anymore, a friend of mine was like, "Hey, there's this thing going on over here, TV show they're starting up. You should check it out." So I applied and got a job as the graphic designer for playback on the Stargate TV
So
show.
Stargate was your first.
Stargate was my first,
Wow.
yeah.
Are you in Vancouver at this point?
Right now I'm in San Francisco. Yes.
So you were.
Oh, wait, at this point in the story, yeah, that was Vancouver. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and it was interesting. And so yeah, I took my design and my illustration work over there, and I think I was aware sort of what they did, but not really, because I was coming out of print and magazine work and so I just took a bunch of work over there and ended up getting hired as the playback graphic designer. So the playback is the computer screens. Um, when they, in a TV show go, look at the rotating brain and scrolling text, it's, science. That's the stuff that I did on the computers on the TV show for a year. And during that period, which was fun, but I noticed this other thing that was happening, over there that looked really cool, which was all of the environment work that they were doing. Stargate's basically every episode is a new world.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, that's the whole idea of the show. So for me, coming out of again fine art and my background, which did I mention that in this recording that
Mm-hmm.
my background is, yeah, fine art. Um, Landscape painting was something that really interested me. So when I saw the matte painting and the environments, being a science fiction nerd that I was with this graphic design background, it just kind of like tweaked, and I was like, oh my god, that looks fun. That looks really interesting. Plus, it was the early days of 3D. So
Right.
like really early days. I think we had a program called Electric Image. Um, I think maybe episode 2 had come out by then, but maybe not. It was 1996,
7.
1997. There you go.
Yeah, when it started airing.
Yep, exactly. So I just kind of fell into it,
Oh.
and I found the 3D fascinating. Uh, it was actually early. We had one program for modeling and another program for rendering. So it was pretty early stuff, and I just found that fascinating. That I could dive into these 3D environments, um, and build simple 3D and then paint and collage. It was just sort of a really lovely mix of a lot of things that I was really interested in.
So you're
Um,
exploring creatively.
totally, totally, yeah.
Wow.
It was, dude, it was fun. It was really nice, because it was all nobody knew it, but I mean, me in particular. I mean, it's not to say that there wasn't work that had been done before. Of course, there was. I
Right.
mean, I think they had a matte painter on the show who'd worked for ILM, and ILM, of course, is doing amazing work in matte painting. But it really did feel like the early days, for me. Um, and a lot of the techniques that we ended up using were stuff that we kind of just made up and invented. Um, and I'm remembering now because it's been a while since I thought about this.
Mm.
And pardon me if I ramble.
No, this happens quite a lot on the show. People discover stuff once they start getting back into the meat of it. It's the brain's an amazing thing.
The memory game that you can play, right? Like if you remember one thing, you think about that thing, and suddenly you start remembering other things.
That's it.
Do it, right? It's like
Please be
anyway.
my guest.
Yeah, no, when I ended up leaving, after 6 years or 5 years, I forget what it was, to go to ILM, Industrial Light and Magic,
Oh.
episode 2, I think it was. And when I brought my work down and we were showing it and talked to them, I ended up getting hired, for the job, and they were like, "This is interesting. These are the same techniques that we're working with here, that we were sort of coming up with." It was myself and Jeremy Hoey was the other environment artist. I don't know if you've spoken to him.
Not yet.
Yeah, he's still actually in the business. I've moved into doing concept art, and more art direction. Jeremy Hoey is running the environments department for Sony in Vancouver now, so he's built it up. And I think Krista McLean, was there for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's working with I forget the company. Is it Rainmaker or
Rainmaker doesn't exist anymore. It's turned into something else.
okay,
But it's entirely possible that she was at Rainmaker for a while.
she
So,
was. I think. Yeah,
yeah.
it's well since I've seen the industry in Vancouver. But yeah, so it was a journey of discovery, and a really interesting one for a while, because so much of it was about building the image. It was early days of 3D tracking, early days of camera, sort of controls, and we really kind of dug into it. It was nice. It was
As
sweet, a show with a budget, so
right, exactly.
to do
Yeah,
this.
to have a little bit of money behind it. You guys were right at the cusp of going from just straight up flat matte paintings. I'm a huge Star Trek fan, so largely everything in my knowledge, in terms of visual effects is Star Trek based. And for years, like on TNG, DS9, there were painting shots with little people added. But come along with SG-1, late 90s, there's
Mhm.
there's there's not just slight pans over a painting. We've got actual movement. Digital matte
Yeah,
paintings are coming to life. I can't imagine the frontier that must have opened up for you that you could jump into at that point.
that was fascinating. Yeah, we started off with the flat matte paintings because that was the tech, at the time. They didn't have 3D camera tracking, but they did have programmed camera movements, that they could preset up, where they put the camera on a track and they dolly, and move, and it's very controlled. Um, but that was really expensive, so they didn't do that often. And for the matte painting, it was mostly wide establishing shots. Um, the shots where the hero comes over the hill and they cut in tight to his face, and he goes, "Wow, look at that!" And then they cut to the fakey looking city in the distance, or something. That was basically the shots that we were doing for the first year.
Yeah.
I think the first shot was recreating the Abydos temple from the movie, if you remember that one, where the big pyramid first lands, on the pole. It was recreating that, and that was a locked off shot, and the little people, walking into it for the first year.
So
Was
you were a
basically
part of that shot.
not for the movie, but for the
Not for the
TV.
for the TV. Okay, so you were joining SG-1 in pre-production in 1996, 97 then?
Yep, yep.
Okay, I
And
misunderstood. I thought you came in a little bit later.
no, no, it was the very first year.
Okay.
And for the first year, like I say, it was the computer playback. It was the graphics,
Okay.
for the screens. And then the second year, I got into the matte painting and
Did
environment.
you help develop the playback for the dialing sequence?
Yeah,
Dude,
I mean,
holy cow.
stealing what they did from the movie, right?
Yeah, but still making it your own thing at the same time. It's
So,
not one to one, and you've got several years on top of what they did for the film.
yes,
did you see the did take me back a little bit further? Did you see the film when it came out? Were you aware of Stargate? Okay,
Good.
so you're
Growing up,
already aware.
yeah, beautiful movie. It was actually, I remember the way they used the environments in the matte painting there was very classic, like really beautiful establishing shots. I forget who did them, you know.
Patrick Tatopoulos's team was brilliant.
Was it okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
his team there, they did some amazing stuff. There's so many people involved in that feature film, and it set such a precedent
It was a
for
great film.
everyone else that came later. So you were brought in. They're in pre-production on Stargate SG-1. What
Yep.
was your first project on the series? Was it the dialing sequence?
Recreating the dial-in sequence. Yeah.
Oh my god! Tell me about this. This is like the thing that SG-1 was known for.
Yeah, it was super fun to do because it was a research project. So we had some of the props. You know, we had the original pyramid. We had the ships, the flying ships. Some of the props they shipped up, but they didn't. I don't know what the standard is. You know, for movies, they kind of come and go. They're everybody thinks like, oh my God, movies. You know, it's so amazing, but they're really fly by night. They're really seat of the pants. You know, like when it comes to stuff. Not a lot is kept usually. You know, things are created and used and then generally discarded. You know,
Hmm.
some stuff is kept, and they didn't keep, or we didn't have access to any of the files that were used to create any of the playback. You know, or any of the computer screens, or of course any of the matte paintings, because that probably was all done by third-party companies. You know, I think we made a brief attempt, but gave up. So it was
Hmm.
basically a case of watching the movie, you know, and recreating the stuff from scratch. You know, I think we did it with vector art originally using Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop, and at that point, I think we were animating in. Eventually, it was After Effects.
Mm.
First, we tried with the memory game.
Yeah.
Um, First, we tried another program. We tried briefly to create a little computer program so that they could actually plug the keyboard, you know, and actually have it assemble, you know, sort of properly. But we gave up after a while. I think it would just take way too long, and I'm not a programmer. And you know,
Okay.
things are running quickly. So we ended up doing, you know, pre-animated sequences for each dial-up, you know, where the ring would spin on the screen. But yeah, it was all vector art and graphics animated, I think, through After Effects, and then pre-rendered out.
It's what that original show is known for.
Totally, it was
That
a great
that
design. I mean,
puddle, that everything involved in the dialing sequence, that was the beginning of adventure, and then you go through it and blank canvas. Um,
totally, yeah,
Absolutely wild. So you were involved in playback for season 1.
season
Um,
one. And
where
during that, I did a couple of the matte paintings. I think
Okay.
during that first season, they had a matte painter who was working remotely. His name was Eric Chauvin, who came out of ILM, and he was doing wonderful work. But I think he had Blackpool Studios at the time. I think it might be gone now. Uh, Really cool guy. But I got a sense on some of the matte paintings that he did that he was probably maybe a little overbooked. You know, like he
Okay.
was he was doing like really beautiful work for film, and then for a couple of projects, it would come in and they'd be like, you know, okay, you
How
know,
much time was spent? Yeah.
right, you know, I mean, again, he does beautiful, beautiful work. But for me, it was an opportunity, you know, because I was looking at this stuff and I was thinking, in my heart of hearts, you know, my little jerk self, you know, thinking I could do better. You know, I want to do this. I
Well, you
I
see
could
an
do this.
opportunity for yourself, and
And I
if
want
you
to
can do the job.
you know, so it was a thing that really sparked. And so I ended up talking my way into doing a couple of the matte paintings for them. And then I did a test where I took one of the matte paintings at one point that Eric had done and rebuilt it, you know,
Right.
using 3D, you know, and it just kind of really, I think, sold, you know, that whole process to the team and got me kicked off. So the second year they moved me into being the full-time matte painter, um, and hired someone else that I was overseeing to do the playback. And that's how it all started.
You say that you took one that had already been done and added some 3D. There is a matte painting change from season 1 to the season 2 finale with the Nox planet with the city floating in the sky.
That's the one. Yep. That was the one.
Wow. I always wondered, why did they go out of their way to do that? And it's like, well, if he went ahead and did it, why not? Because
Yep.
it was like night and day. There was motion added to it and everything. Wow, that grew out from that.
Yeah.
Man, the one I'd like to. Is this too early to go into show and tell?
Oh, jump in, man.
Okay,
It's whatever. Yeah, whatever you want to do.
let's pull this up here. Was this the first one you did?
No,
It was
no,
not. Oh, what was the first one you did?
almost the first one that I did. The first one was the pyramid shot.
Oh, from the pilot.
Yep, from the first. Yeah,
Wow. Okay. So you said you used vector art and Photoshop and After Effects.
only for the graphics. For these, it was Photoshop and Photoshop basically.
Wow. Okay. This is from Solitudes. This is from the back half of season 1, and
Right.
I always thought that they flew up further north to get this shot, and you created this.
It didn't. I'm looking right now. Yeah, I totally created that. I'm looking right now to see if I actually have the plate for that.
I remember hearing a story about this episode because it was all done on a soundstage, the ice planet. They refrigerated the set. This is Martin Wood's episode. I think it may have been his first as director. And she comes out of the hole, and they get this wide shot. And I was always under the impression that they went up there and got this photographed. And the fact that you did this for nearly 25 years is completely, absolutely went over my head. I thought that this was a real image. So that's really cool.
Let me share my screen here.
Yeah.
'Cause, I think they did go a little further north. I forget exactly where, but let me show you the plate.
Okay, so that's real.
Yeah, there it is. This is the shot that they took for that.
Wow.
Locked off shot. So it was a case of taking this, and basically merging, the created stuff. Let me see if I can flip between them. Hang on.
Yeah.
There we go.
Wow. Night and day.
So you can see, yeah, you can see some of it is the original. And then at some point, yeah, we just took over completely.
That is wild. The horizon, the sky, like daylight is leaving. It makes it really emotional. Considering, oh, they're screwed. It's that point in the episode. So,
The episode, they were trapped in an ice cave, I think, was
yeah.
this was the point that how do I stop sharing? This was the point that she climbs up, right? And this,
Yeah.
yeah, coming back to me.
The Stargate has failed to dial. There's got to be something nearby, and we find out that they're basically not gonna make it. Stop participants sharing. There we go. But that's just a wild scene, and I always was under the assumption that was not a matte painting. So that's really cool. So
I mean, that's kind of the thing. That's what we always used to say about matte painting is when you've done your job properly, nobody notices.
that's it. So this is done from a piece of concept art that I believe Ken Rebel did of
I think the art director was Richard Hudolan.
Yep, that's correct. Production designer.
Production designer, yep. And then Ken, yeah.
And then you brought this to life. Now this image is far more complicated. Because
This one's interesting because this was beyond my 3D skill at that time. So we actually hired someone to build it in 3D. And I supervised them for building that one. I think they built it in in the early Maya program,
Okay.
which a 3D program. And it's funny, I look at these now and there's things I do differently.
Oh, of course. The
Yeah.
artist in you, there's always going to be an itch to change something. It's like with the
It's
technology that you have now, why not?
right.
You
Well,
know?
also, I mean, skill and just, different style and time. The other thing to think about too is that these shows are always done with a really tight timeline, with a lot of different um, episodes and images going on concurrently, right?
Of course.
So, I mean, that's the thing that nobody watching it should ever have to care about. But and again, if we've done our job well, you don't and shouldn't. But it's always interesting to look back on this and think about the time constraints, and how if you had more time, you would have done this. If you'd had more time, you would have done that.
Of course.
It's the context, the back end, that we who made these things, see that you guys, who enjoyed them or watched them originally probably aren't aware of,
Of
and it's
course.
a fun journey, for me to look back on these now. So yeah, I mean, I do it differently now because the technology is different. Um, but they're fun images, aren't they?
How many man hours am I looking at here?
No idea. I don't remember.
Okay.
Probably not as many as you'd think. Um,
So not weeks. He sighs.
it's hard to
Okay.
say.
That's fair.
I'm thinking about it here now because
Well, you have a great concept artist who I've got the original. If you want to see it here, let me pull it up.
I haven't seen that for
Yeah,
years.
give me just a minute here. There, can you see that?
Yep. Yeah, awesome. See,
It's largely there.
he's working in pencil at this point,
Yeah,
like this is almost pre-digital days,
yeah.
it's just amazing. Um,
He's using whiteout for the lights.
totally, right? Gouache, whiteout, exactly. Yes, I mean that's the production flow, as they do these designs, get them approved by the art director or Richard Houdolan or
Mm-hmm.
the showrunners. I think it was Jonathan Glasner.
Jonathan Glasner and
Yeah,
Brad Wright.
Brad Wright, yeah. And then they come to us and we're part of a flow, so our job is to create, the images that they sketch out. They sketch out these ideas and then the plates are shot. Like you saw with the Solitudes, matte painting, the plates are shot. And then they say, in this case, it was Richard Dean Anderson, I think, and
Mm-hmm.
the actor leaning over a balcony looking at a blue screen, throwing a couple of grenades or something.
Yeah,
Yeah, like that, exactly.
and Tony
Yeah.
Amendola.
Yep.
Um, and if you're doing your job right, I suppose it's just a matter of continuing to evolve it and never having to go, nope, stop, completely start over. The only thing that's really different is the angle. I mean, this is kind of more akin to what the final look was. They're on a bridge,
On a bridge.
like a causeway overlooking the engine mechanics, and just one little grenade takes out this entire ship. There's something
As they
that,
do. I mean,
yeah, it's low
very
tech.
fragile things, those alien spaceships. Yeah, no, so the final angle, I think there were two or three different angles that we did of this, different cuts in the edit. Um, but the way of selling, the physicality and the reality, supposedly, of these totally fake environments is you have to match the camera angle and the camera perspective and the camera lens, right? So that really dictates what we can do in the final. They'll so the key art that Ken did is used to drive the filming, basically, right? We wouldn't do the matte paintings or the 3D environments before the plates are shot. So what would happen is they would take these sketches and these things, and they'd go on set, and they would build the sets that they need to that would support these plans, and then they bring the cameras in and they would shoot the plates for them. In this case, Richard Dean Anderson and the other actor leaning over a balcony. And once the plates are shot, they get scanned and they come into our system where they would be match moves, basically. So we take them into a 3D program sometimes, and determine the camera angles that we have to match. And this is what would drive at that point the 3D. I think that's still the process now. So you match the camera, you build the 3D, you get the rough approved, and then you move forward to doing the final image. So in this case, this was a sketch to design the idea and to inform the director, what was supposed to happen. Then again, the set would be built, the plate would be shot, and then it would come to us. So our work in the final, was totally driven by whatever the plate was, and this is always the case.
So much goes into just telling a story. It's absolutely wild. All right, let me see here. Thor's Chariot. This is it's also early on in season 2. You guys have taken the design of the Gould's pyramid ships from the film, and we're beginning to finally start to see that design in the show. This was interesting because there are a couple of shots of this in the episode where there's a little bit of a tighter shot kind of off to the side where you kind of see the ships being built. If you look really closely, it's kind of wild what's happening there. They're kind of coming together like a reverse, like domino effect, like almost like Legos. I can't imagine what that must have been like to design.
This one.
Let me stop sharing. That's it. Wow.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, the design of this was based on the original movie prop, right?
Yep.
And then we built this in 3D, really early 3D. And then I think
You just need the gist of it.
Yeah, the animation and the assembly was done exactly. The animation, the assembly was done using compositing. Here's different elements and plates. There was the 3D render right there.
Wow.
These are alphas that we created. Yeah, that's it. I think that's all I have. These aren't going to show up because they're maybe it's the same.
You never know. And maybe not.
And maybe not.
That's still really cool. Wow. Okay, there you go. You got the camp.
Yep. So the camp is all matte painting. I think that was the plate that was shot.
Yep.
So
So they found a location with those vehicle paths.
Yes.
Man.
I think. Sorry, it's all coming back to me now.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's only 25 years ago, Kent. Why aren't you? Come on. And then on top of that, you've got people moving around. In that circumstance, does it just really come down to, okay, this is as much time as, oh, wow, look at that.
There you go. Yeah.
This is as much time as I have to commit to this, so I'm going to give it as much detail as I can before I have to hand it off.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's planning the shot and how it's going to be composited. Because like you were saying, in this case, the compositing, the assembly of the matte painting is done by another person. And they use elements and plans, that we make and set up for them. How long this would have taken? Dude, I want to say a couple of days, like
wow.
A few days,
That's fast.
Because again, you've got a lot of stuff, that we're bringing together.
Man, oh man. It's at various stages of completion as we go back to it throughout the episode.
I think so. That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Because the action was mostly taking place off-site. They're running around in caves and in the woods. But this is Heru-Ur's main base of operations. And then Thor, comes along and smashes it all to hell later on. Oh, gosh. This is a great scene. So, do you have any reference of the Asgard ship? I guess that was done digitally.
That was built. So what I do have, let's have a look here. Remind me the episode again.
This is Thor's Chariot.
Thor's Chariot.
208, I believe.
Let me share it.
Yeah.
Take the journey with me.
So this is the second Asgard episode. This is the This is the second time we returned to Samaria, and the first time that we actually encounter not just a hologram and an Asgard answering machine, but we actually get a look at an Asgard mothership, which has only been described in Jaffa legend.
Yeah, this is there's some earlier renders. See
Wow.
the other, you can see how some of the painting and retouching is done. So we build these things very simply and texture them and then rework them. Here it is coming together. There's some floating tents for you.
Gould magic.
I know, right? Here's some of the boats.
Wow. Okay.
North of Vancouver. So many alien planets were shot just north of Vancouver.
You go with what you have.
We do. Exactly. Yeah, I think that's it. The alien ship was a different episode. That was.
Oh, that was. I mean, Thor's Chariot was the mothership was introduced in Thor's Chariot for
Okay,
sure.
yeah.
I can show you the illustrations if you'd like.
I'd love to see them.
Okay, let's show them to you. Absolutely. Several runs were done of this one. So this was
Ken and Richard again,
this
right?
is Ken, yeah. This is the first one. It's radically different, or maybe this was the second. I'm not sure. So the 9th of April, and then okay, so this was earlier. So the 16th of March. The first time I saw this one, I was like, "This is damn cool." You know?
It ended up looking a lot less interesting in the final, didn't it?
Yeah.
There it is, right there.
There you go. But that's the image that Stargate fans know.
Yep.
Because we saw that again in early season 3, flying over Earth, and then in late season 3, plummeting into the Pacific Ocean. So, but you can see this kind of central engine system design coming from this influence here.
Totally.
And they move it over into the main body, which I love the idea. And you can see this throughout the illustration work of something being done somewhere else, them putting it aside, not using it, but then coming along later on and saying, this idea that we had over here, let's move it into this. And so very few ideas are ever wasted, if any, because it helps you evolve the process.
And also because we're working fast.
It's true too.
Right, there you go.
Serpent's Lair. But yeah, no, it's just there's so much happening here. There was a cheat in this episode, so we got the Horus helmets from modified them from the feature film, but they couldn't afford doing the effect on screen, so they cut away to Daniel, and then cut back. Oh, there's your map painting, and then we cut back to Heruer with the helmet off, and we just traded it in for sound effects. But later on in this season, in an episode called Secrets, we kind of see it done with a tighter shot on Teal'c's face.
Nice.
So, yeah, and there's the there's the put together. Yeah.
I remember that moment from the film, when the helmet
Yes.
first came off, it retracted into the costume.
That was so wild.
I was like probably 12 or something, or 10, I forget, And I just remember going, oh my God, that's so cool.
That's it. All right. Message in a bottle. This was cool. I've got the art.
Not, wasn't it? So what you're looking at right there is a 3D, sorry, not 3D, a physical model that was built
by
John
team. By who?
Actually, no. So it is partially a physical model. What episode is this again?
This is 207, Message in a Bottle.
Message in a bottle. Let me call up some.
So they had several designs for this structure.
Yeah. So the structure we built in 3D, and we did a 3D render, a camera move on that one. But the background was was, and I'm looking through my files here to find them. The background that we're looking at there was a physical model in the center, like maybe the center third of it is a plate
Mm-hmm.
of an actual built moonscape. And then we built it out on the top and the bottom and the sides as a matte painting. And then in the final, what we did, yeah, exactly. So you're looking at probably the center third of that is the model. And then the rest of it is all extended matte painting. Um, I think,
That's just
John,
wild.
correct me, he might still have the plates for that. Or maybe the top was a matte painting. I kind of forget. But we made it huge for the time. And what we ended up doing was rendering the foreground tower in 3D with the camera pulling back. And then we used in compositing this plate and shifted and scaled it to make it look like it was. There you go. Um, this one, yeah.
I have to say, um, it's it gets the job done and it tells the story. But in many respects, this shot here alone um, looks more realistic to me.
Well, when it comes into they always treat it, and I mean, their goal is to tell the story, not to represent our work in the best.
It's not all about you. Right, it's about the story. That's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, so they do what they think is proper, to get the story.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Bane. So very early on, we had very few technologically advanced planets that we explored.
It was all
Descendants.
North Vancouver skates. Yeah.
I imagine there's some North Vancouver in here somewhere, or some Vancouver downtowns in this image somewhere. Let me see if I can pull the original image for this.
Water is the only thing that's real.
Right. So several different designs were done.
Yep.
This is Ken.
I like the designs better than I like the final.
Oh gosh. Well, you got he was a genius. He was absolutely brilliant. And according to Richard, he was like fastidious. Like you had to tear him away from his work because he just wanted to keep on refining. And at a certain time, at least once or twice, Richard had to just pull it out of his artboard because it's like, it's time to do the presentation, man. We're taking this in.
Yeah.
So, and that's another one where it's an shot from the very top of the episode.
Interesting because here, like what I see when I look at this, and I'm pretty critical about these things, but what I see are all the mistakes, in ways, that we made, and the limitations of early compositing, and the time, of course, that we had to work on these things.
You only have so much time, I mean, if you had more time, you'd probably add the impact of the water hitting these panels.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah.
You see it a little bit here on the one underneath the Stargate. There's a little bit of some action happening, and then one in the immediate foreground here, like just a little bit of a one. But you can't. You got to move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Production is demanding it. So, but considering the time that you had, it sells the story. You definitely pull it off.
Thank you. Yeah, this one was a complete photo collage at the time. This is one of my favorites. It's one of the simpler one, but I really enjoyed doing this one.
It's one of the most important to the franchise because this is our first encounter with one of our most important allies.
That's right, isn't it? Yeah.
The Asgard were with us through the rest of the show, and they committed mass suicide by
What?
the end of the series in season 10.
That's really sad.
Yeah,
What happened?
their genetic they couldn't get past their cloning problem, and it began to deteriorate their physical bodies. And instead of allowing all of their technology to fall into enemy hands, they blew all themselves up, and they invited us to witness the event in orbit. So
Yeesh.
it was really sad. But so who would have done this?
No idea.
Okay,
I've
that's
never seen
perfectly
that.
fair.
I don't remember seeing. I'm sure I must have, but I don't remember seeing that. What's the episode again? This is
This is 215, the fifth race.
fifth race. Okay. See what I can find.
Yeah. Yeah, there's two shots of this. This is the first one, and I don't know if I set aside the next shot. Yes, there it is. There's the other shot.
Yep.
Right there. You got a little lens flare happening here.
No. So the foreground, the single foreground piece that they're standing in front of is a set.
Okay.
Yeah. The 2 feet coming down to the one top piece there on both left and the right, that is a set.
Okay. And then the rest
Yeah.
is an extension.
The rest is an extension.
I got to say these little Asgard are more than enough for nightmare fuel.
You're freaking me out now, too. I'd remember if I saw it. Oh, there it is. Hang on. Okay.
Yeah.
There's the plate. So there's the matte painting,
Yeah.
and there's the plate that was shot on set.
Wow. So the first two were real. Okay. Wow. Look at that. And you can see the back of the stage wall. That's definitely bridge. Wow. Okay. That a lot more was real than I anticipated.
It's good that you can't tell.
That's the thing. Can the customer, does the customer know the difference? You know, no.
And
Wow. How cool.
yeah, it's fun to see, isn't it? In this kind of context, right?
Nowadays they would throw up a volume in that space, and you could move the camera independently of the shot. But now you had to lock off the camera and just kind of do there's like a tilt up, after O'Neill gets off the floor, and he's holding that. Wow, look at that. Different lighting configurations.
So that was the render that was done in 3D for that plate.
So you rendered on top of what was created on the set for those shots, I guess, to match them up.
Again, yeah. So we take the plates, and you can see the perspective in the camera lens. Distorts the image, so it would have to be matched. And then we render to match that plate. Here's the plate that was shot. I don't know if I have the 3D for that. But yeah,
It's been 25 years. I'm thankful you have anything.
No,
Right?
I'll go back to the other one.
Well, this is 26 years, so. Yep, that's the entrance. Wow, that is so cool that we can see this. Yeah, he flies through the gate.
Yeah. And then, so here's the plate. So you can see obviously, it's a real physical thing. So the perspective lines and everything have to be matched, in order for it to sit in properly. But yeah.
Just crazy the amount of content that goes into completing just a few shots of a show to tell a story.
Nobody thinks about it,
right?
Ideally, at this point, you're thinking about the little guys in the character of Richard Dean Anderson standing up,
Mm-hmm.
to meet them. That's what you really want to be focusing on. Everything else is there just to support that,
Mm-hmm.
So,
you believe that he's in this place.
Ideally, yeah.
The thing that would bother me would be the reflections on the floor there of the original of the stage wall. Part of me would want to just rebuild it from scratch. But But again, it comes down to time. And of course, the longer that you stare at something, the more you're going to notice certain issues. So,
Well, that's exactly it, right? Like you're there not to make something. I mean, you make it as perfect as you can, but you make it for the context in which it's shown, right? Which is a quick panning shot or a look up, or a thing. There's always things that you can pick apart in anything, but the goal at the time is to sell the moment, at that moment in the show, right? And if it does its job, you know, hopefully it doesn't look too fakey, but if it does its job, that's all that matters.
what rules of thumb are you living by at this point in production, working on this stuff 25 years ago? Um, so
Well,
to keep yourself from getting swept away in one specific shot, do you give yourself X amount of hours to work on something? Or, I mean, do you have a specific deadline on a date for each shot to hand it off? How is this
you're,
working internally at this point?
you're totally part of a production system, always. I mean, the way it's working is that we have several shots going on at any one time,
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the show's released once a week, but
Yep.
it took, I think we had a development process of like 3 weeks or something, or a month for each show in the whole thing. So we have several shows going on concurrently. Um, so realistically speaking, we probably over only spent the equivalent of a week on any episode, um, in totality. But that would have been stretched over the period of a month, so you're working on different things at the same time. So how long do these things take? Several days,
Mm.
like it's just, but it's a case of like work on it for a little bit, move on to something else, come back to it, get it done. Of course, there are deadlines because everything has to fit into the production system, and get delivered down the line, so that nothing is waiting because it really is, for lack of a better term, a sausage factory. Yeah,
I
I just
imagine
out, you know.
I imagine Joe Goldsmith and the folks at Sharp Sound aren't working with a finished plate. I imagine they're probably working with something that's somewhere along the way that at least has the timing locked off and an idea of what they're looking at. How far along was Air from a lot of the shots that you would hand out? Was it weeks? Was it
I
days? Okay.
totally, because there's a lot that happens after, there's the editing, there's the assembly. It's all happening at the same time. So what we do is we deliver rough edits, or they would have placeholders for our shots, because they film everything, and it was filmed back then.
Mm-hmm.
They would film everything cut by cut by cut, and then scan it, and then begin to assemble it in editing. And what they would do for our shots, of course, they've been planned out, like we talked about from Richard and Ken, so they had the plates that they would shoot on set, and they would put them in as placeholders, and then as we would rough our work in, we would hand it back to them or onto them, with our rough edits in place, basically, or sometimes we'd give them just the 3D that they would drop in. Um, and then after that, it would go on to compositing, and the finals would be delivered, back to them and inserted. And so it's interesting because there's a lot to consider, doing the environments in the matte painting. It's more than just the image itself. You have to look at the cuts and consider the context of which it's shown, the lighting, the feel, the color timing, the shots, again, like, have to tell the story. They have to blend in and just tell that moment, and then move on, right, with the story. And so the color has to match, the lighting has to match, everything has to, be part of that flow. Um, so
It's
it's
so much,
interesting.
man.
It was fun to do, I mean, at times I remember getting annoyed, because, or just tired and burned out,
Yeah.
because it is a constant kind of thing, and you get a bit cynical, I suppose, in any system, right? Because you're just, again, churning it out because it's
There's
a bit
not
of a,
enough time.
you don't have enough time to finish things to your preference. You have to move on, and then there's money and there's technical constraints. But looking back, I mean, it was a fun opportunity. It was a really fun process, just because of that churn, because of that get it done, move on to something else, kind of feeling, right?
We talked
It's
with
I remember once, we shared a building, we worked on the bridge set, right? The visual effects team, and then we'd go to the sound stages and we'd come back, and it was all part of the mix.
So you're in house.
Totally in house, yeah. Some of the work wasn't. John Gadecki had his separate studio where the compositing was done. That was downtown. But we had an office. James Titchener
Yep.
and me, and I forget her name.
Michelle Comans.
Michelle Clemens. Yep. We all worked in a building together. On the same floor, which we actually shared with the Outer Limits as well too. That
Yep.
was in the building. But downstairs was the prop house, and downstairs is also where the bathroom was. So we were going downstairs, and the bathroom was separated, by a little sort of open fence, a chicken wire fence or something, with a little door in it. And the prop guys, were on the other side. And I remember coming down once to go to the bathroom, and I remember hearing them, and they couldn't tell that people were there, so they were just talking their normal day, and they were going, oh yeah, I could never do visual effects, because my standards are just too high. I look at the stuff that they do, and it looks kind of fakey, right? And so I could never do that because I wouldn't be able to accept the kind of work that.
And you're in the John hearing this.
I'm like listening to this, yeah, and it's just it's interesting. I mean, in a lot of cases, because sure, the stuff does end up looking fakey, and there's no excuse for that, but it's interesting, I think, to consider the constraints, that these things were done under a lot of times, for technical, for time constraints, and just see it all in context, So I think where we did sometimes make those shots that didn't look fakey, and I think Stargate had a really high quality, of standard, generally for TV shows. I mean, now it's out of the fucking roof, if I can, say that. You look at what they're doing on, oh God, I don't know, any TV show, the famous ones being what's the throwback show where they have the Stranger Things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I haven't seen it since season 2. I'm waiting for it to finish, and then I'll mow it down. But I just watched, and I just crushed that they canceled it. 1899. On
The German show.
Yeah, well, Dark's spinoff, yes, and
Okay.
they used the volume on a turntable and was able to move the background scenery in real time with the action in the front. And
Oh, yeah, that's the most amazing technology in the last, 20 years. I think that
Unreal 5, you
if
can
they
render
invent that,
photorealism in real time. I
yeah, well,
don't
they
know how
invented
you.
that at ILM. I think that was Proctor. Andy Proctor was overseeing that. And they first, I think, as I know anyway, brought it in for the Mandalorian
Mhm. Of
TV show,
course, Star Wars is going to set the precedent.
right? But yeah, no, that's the most amazing. That's the next. That is the next leap in matte painting. Like pulling it into 3D, and that extensively and tracking with the camera. It's just fucking amazing.
Because he's chrome. He's made of chrome, and that alone, the realism of shooting an element behind him so that reflections are correct.
This is it. The lighting and the reflections. Because what they're doing is they're building it with LEDs, which it's possible to get the high dynamic lighting, right? So what they're doing is they're creating a 3D environment in Unreal and they're representing all of the lighting in that environment, properly, right? So they light for the foreground, they have this set and they track it, and all of the reflections, all of the lighting that comes from the back is real, to that environment. And this is exactly one of the fakey things that we could never do. Back then it was like you've seen, the green screens, right? You put the characters in front of a green screen, and then you track the camera and you replace it after, right? Like the great thing about the Mandalorian sets is that you're basically front loading, the environments. You're building them, so it's all a much more considered and holistic process. You
Mm-hmm.
don't have to try and fix some shit, that was filmed poorly on set. You don't have to try and match lighting that was never going to look real in the first place. Like a lot of times you see in these old shows, the characters will be standing outside in theory, right? But it's obviously been filmed on a green screen, right? With the weird set lighting, and there's no way to make that thing look good, right?
You can only
it's just
guess.
yeah, right? So it's exactly. That's fun stuff, man. I wish we'd had that,
Well,
when we were show.
I got a couple of responses to that. Number one, you better make sure that you've got it right, because once it's in the can, if it's not correct, you got to go back to the set and do it over again. The other part of it is, old guys like you and me, we're looking for those details. And while we're saying to ourselves, wow, that's cool, that's amazing, look how realistic it is, part of us, honestly, is being pulled out of the story.
Totally.
And we're spending our time on that because we're so mesmerized by the technology that we have to remind ourselves, oh yeah, let's go back to the story and watch the story. Whereas kids and people who their minds are still spent so much in a dream phase where kids are magic. They can be anything. They have unlimited potential. They're seeing all this stuff, and whether it's the fifth race with O'Neill shaking hands with the Asgard or the Mandalorian and Grogu, the same ideas get born out of the kids' minds because it's where it needs to be for them. It was then, it is now, but it's just more refined.
Imagination, right? You're freeing the imagination. Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was the Nox in early season 1. And so did you go back in there on your own originally? Or was this a mandate to refine this image for the flashback at the end of season 2?
Well, as I recall, let me find the what was the episode again?
This is 222, Out of Mind.
Yeah. Okay, so
and I've got many a piece of concept art for this one if you'd like to see the originals before we move over.
yeah, so as I recall, this one was one of Eric's matte paintings originally. Eric Chauvin. Let's see. Beautiful, beautiful work. But this was one that I think no one was ultimately happy with because it lacked what you're saying now is that next step, right? Like the physicality, like it felt like a matte painting because of what I've described. Let me actually share my screen.
Okay.
Because I've got a couple of things here. It was one of those shots that was never going to look good, right?
Well, I would argue it would never look amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
So this was the original.
That's the episode.
Yeah. And this is the way it was first aired. And I remember this is what aired. And when it came back around, I forget the episode that we did it for. They cut it back into the original.
This is Out of Mind. Yeah. 2X22. Yeah. Hathor is pulling their memories to get information.
That's exactly it. So when we knew, I think it was one of those shows where, like you were saying, they do the memory tour, right?
Yep.
Remember the time and remember the time. The reason they do those shows is because it saves budget. Like if they're out of budget, they'll write a show like that so that they don't have to do any new effects. On this one, we had the shot that was coming up. Oh, remember the Nox, blabbity blabbity. And we had the shot coming up and all of us were saying, we were never really happy, with the way that looked. So they found a bit of money in the budget to have me spend some time and then do a compositing and basically to recreate the shot. And this was the first time that I really explored doing this in 3D.
I think this is Stargate's first example of retconning.
Retcon, let's remind me that.
So retroactive continuity. You're creating something new and saying that this was how it was then. You were just remembering a little different. Yes, there we go.
I think that was the concept art, right?
I've got a couple to compare to that too. Let me show you mine. You've shown me yours. Real quick here. Yeah, that's basically it though. Let me pull this here.
Yep.
Okay, there's mine.
Take over. I'm not seeing. I'm still sharing.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
So they basically pulled the asset that you needed to see there.
Yep.
But and then they actually developed an alternate there.
I don't remember that one. That's interesting.
And
okay, so
the Fenry. And then we actually got to go into the city.
Nice.
So Ken did a concept of what it would actually look like in the city, which would have blown out the budget at that point.
I remember. I don't think we did that one.
No. But it's cool to
But
see it,
the
you
whole
know?
idea, we wanted to do this. We were never happy with the way it looked, so we took the time to rebuild it in 3D. This was fun for me because this is one of the first times I was doing anything this extensive.
Wow.
And
So
then
you took the model and
I
then
built, and then yeah, we took it and animated a slow rotation. You know,
wow. What work. Next episode 301 Into the Fire. I love this because you take advantage of the existing set, which they could pull the walls back and there was a green screen behind it for when they would shoot people coming through the Stargate. And instead you incorporated that into the story.
exactly right. Yeah.
And Ken Rebel did an amazing piece of art for this, which is one of my favorites that he did here.
Hmm.
That is just cool.
It has a nice graphic quality to it, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, also he was at the start of the season, so he could spend more time coloring. So absolutely amazing to add. And you got the pattern here. This pattern, the visual effect that you did was actually used a little bit again in a season 4 episode called
Right.
The Other Side, where we
Yep.
had space white supremacists led by Rene Aubergenois.
I remember that one.
Yeah. And so they
Big
had
city flyover.
the
Yeah,
what?
exactly. It had the big city flyover, but yeah, we used the generator again with the wall reveal.
Yep, exactly. It's for the generator, and then you had a different one for composite for the stasis pod area. So it just makes sense to continue to. And look at that! I didn't even realize the little cylindrical thing you did. You guys did create that. I'd never noticed that before. I'm always paying attention to this larger arc, this larger archway. Um,
Trying to find some
and
element.
then detonating it. Are these just stock explosions?
They were layered on. Yeah, Christine Petrov, I think, was the compositor on that one, and we did lighting passes. So we rendered it. I rendered it. At this point, I'm working in a program called Lightwave.
Yep.
So we've moved out of sort of the early Form Z and electric image and into Lightwave, which gave us sort of a more physical rendering um, model. And then you could model and animate and build in the same package, which was very exciting at the time. So what we did here was we rendered out, we matched the cameras, put the 3D in, and then we rendered what we call several passes. One was a color pass, and then various different lighting passes, where we'd set the lights up and render them in black and white. And these were layered on and controlled and matted out in compositing to create an actual lighting that matched the explosion as it happened, which is I think
For these fireballs, would these have been filmed by Stargate Productions, or would these have been purchased?
I honestly don't know.
Because definitely some elements were shot.
Yeah, you'd have to ask John Gidecki
Okay.
about where he got his elements from, but I think he probably did. I mean, he had a film company, right?
Yep.
And then he did. They were located in Toronto, and he was working with, I think, the guy who runs Rocket Science now. I forget his name. But they shot a lot of movies and they shot a lot of elements and a lot of plays. So it could be that John shot the elements for this.
Okay.
I don't know.
So if you use his company for something, you also get his assets in his library.
He'd bring it in, exactly. Yeah.
That's awesome. Very cool. I just talked with the art director for this episode here, Doug McLean. This was built on the effects stage, and he complained that you couldn't shoot too high because you would then get studio ceiling. But this was also...
Let me find the plate for that. I know I've got it. Remind me the episode.
This is season 308, Demons, and I've got the concept art for it.
Cool. Let's see. Nice. Oh, it looked a lot like the final. Okay.
Very much so.
Sometimes they deviated. I think Ken was never happy, when we changed.
Well, he puts all this work in it, But it's important to remember he's still inspiring you guys.
Totally. No, he's directing in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
for sure. That's
Even the roses that are hanging over these archways here in this shot, you can see them in the final. They're right there.
so what you're looking
So
at there is a set. And I'm trying to find the plates here. Hang on. So they
yeah,
built us.
yeah, but like the upstairs. I mean, that's all, and then the sky is obviously an extension, right?
Yeah, there you go. Let me share my screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the plate is that right there.
Wow.
They got that soft lighting. Yeah, they stretched
A
top
sheet.
feet above. Yeah, there's the other one right there.
Wow. To make it a truly cloudy day. That's wow. Wow. That is so cool.
So these were locked off shots,
Yep.
and what we did was, yeah, we just extended the top. We took all the sets. I was on set, and I would film the textures, basically, shoot photographs of the textures so that we could match them properly.
So you're taking the photographs into the software and using it to essentially copy and paste the textures?
Basically, yeah. There's a lot of tweaking in Photoshop that happens.
Oh, absolutely. But you got to start from somewhere.
Yeah, let's see if we can find some of those textures. I'm amazed actually looking back on it now. So the resolution that we were working with at the time was nowhere near
Yeah.
resolution in film.
Yeah, look at these half a megabyte in some cases of, but I mean that was the resolution then, you know.
Yep, exactly.
Wow, look at all those.
I go
Yeah.
back and quality because it's crap. Um,
Oh, come on. That's what you guys had.
it's crap. Let's see. Here we go.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
Sky element. But you can also see, this is interesting too, what they used to do to save memory is they would squeeze the images. You can see how it's compressed.
Yes, it's basically into a 4x3.
Yep. So what they do is they would, this is the way that we would often work like this. I mean, we'd work proper resolution, but we would deliver compressed like this. And this is a way that they would use to save memory and space back then. Because when you expand them out,
Mm-hmm.
information that's lost visually is not really something you can tell.
I had that conversation with John Gadetsky, and
Yep,
he was showing from Atlantis season 1 these shots that were basically 4x3, and I'm like, everyone's squeezed. And he's like, yeah, we would do that to save money and then pull it sideways. And I have to admit, I was shocked. I was really, really surprised that something that was that state of the art in 2004 was being delivered compressed that way. I had no clue.
Right.
And even Atlantis was up-res to a degree that first season. So
Totally. Yep.
Absolutely wild.
Here's a fun story, which you may have heard before, but Weta worked on the first Lord of the Rings movie, right?
Yeah, they did the trilogies.
I forget what year they did the first episode.
First one was in production September of or January of 2000.
2000. There you go.
Yeah.
All digital, right? Everything was digital at the time. It was filmed, right? But then they'd scan it. All the work was done digitally, and it was delivered. It was one of the first movies, I think, that was delivered to theaters digitally. I could be wrong there. Maybe there were others, but it was one of the first, I think. It was cheaper for them and quicker for them to put a bunch of hard drives in a suitcase and fly a guy from New Zealand to America with the hard drives than it was to actually send the stuff through the intertubes.
And also, oh wow, then it was to actually send it over like fiber.
Yeah, that's how they did it. They put a bunch of hard drives in a suitcase and carried it in an airplane, from New Zealand to America, and that's how they delivered it.
Hope you had the overhead space, because you ain't putting that underneath the plane.
Right.
Can you imagine if it got lost? Wow, I did not know that.
I think it was a guy with a handcuff,
Yeah, like the nuclear football.
Exactly.
That is wild. All right, a couple more.
Yeah.
This is one of my favorites. Whoops. Cannot complete your request, I know. Whoops. Because this is a wider shot here. and you had a lot of stuff happening. There were cars moving around, flying around. This was an advanced gold civilization. Whatever Sokar was doing, he was working it.
Yeah,
And
that was his palace, the view from his palace, right?
absolutely, you had these
Ninth
lights,
episode?
beams of lights into the sky, and then you had Natu in the background. So this is Delmac.
Yeah, the planet. Yeah, and
Uh huh.
what was the episode?
This. Oh, I apologize. This is 312 and 313. Jolinar's memories and the devil you know.
There you go. Okay, cool. Yeah, that was interesting because again, going back to there you go. And going back to the early days of not early, but it was different. We didn't have the storage, we didn't have the memory, we didn't have the computing power in a lot of ways to render something like that, or we hadn't figured it out yet. I think at ILM they were figuring out how to render
Mm-hmm.
cityscapes. I think Yusei did amazing, obviously, work for episode one, and then we did the same thing in episode two. But this was before then, and the way that we figured out to make this cityscape, Sokar's planet, was we actually built a physical model of the city.
We've got the cityscape with the Hattaks in front, and then the city in the background, and the moon. There's a lot of business going on, and also like you're trying to establish Delmac's location in the star system with Natu too as well,
Yep,
because that's going to become very important to the story.
that's right. So here's the original matte paintings that were done for that episode. Um,
Wow!
I'll put this away.
Look at that. That is so cool.
I can't get rid of this. I don't know what I'm doing.
There's an X on the top left.
There we go. Okay, yeah. So yeah, so these are the original matte paintings that were done.
Wow.
Yes.
Look at that.
And
This is a
every
very advanced gold planet by comparison.
Yeah, I think we kind of got a bit carried away because the whole idea was that they were really oppressive, right? That the Goa'uld leaders or whatever his name was, I forget,
Yeah,
Apophis.
Sokar. Yeah, Apophis was definitely
Oh,
really kept his people in the dumps, except for like his few higher up lords, who lived in the Greek cities. So
yeah, this got a bit carried away on. Part of the storytelling in here would have been like a dumpy, sort of lower little city, with these plinths, which are the landing pads for the spaceships, right?
yes,
And again, here I even see a missed opportunity because it would have been nice to make a reference to the original movie and have pyramids here,
yep.
large
I was
pyramids
wondering that myself.
would land on. Yeah. So again, a lot happens. Choices are made in production because we're moving quickly, right? But in this case, what we did was we built a physical model that was about a meter by a meter with these tiny little buildings, and we put them on a soundstage, and we mapped out the soundstage in a grid, and we photographed them with sound lighting in these positions. We would move it and rotate it, and move it and rotate it, and then I'm trying to find some of these photographs here. I'm sure I've got to have them.
I would be so scared to be a citizen of this planet living in this advanced city, wanting to mind your P's and Q's because, if you screw up, you look up in the night sky, that's going to be your destination.
Right. Yeah, that was the prison planet up there, wasn't it?
Yep. I hope this is a satisfying process and not a frustrating one.
No, this is fun. I maybe should have prepared,
No,
but
it's okay. We've been really blessed by your time and your assets.
oh,
You have
thanks.
very nice assets.
Thank you. I've heard. Um, let's see. Yeah, I don't have the original.
It's all right.
Uh, Another time, but yeah, it was a model, and then the foreground.
Hmm.
I guess the foreground was actually the 3D that we did with that,
I just
which I
remember being so blown away by the quality of this. Not that previous episodes weren't, but it was such an intensely different look. Yep, there's the surface of that's the other. So we've switched now. This is the surface of Natu, where the escape pods crash into the upper surface, and they have to go into the caves. Which
Right.
there's a door right there. I've never seen that, never noticed that before. Because the idea is occasionally Sokar comes around with his mothership and beats the hell out of this planet and creates new fissures. So that there's always there's always smoke and debris in the air, and if you are sent to the surface, you don't make it. So
Okay.
that's the ultimate punishment. You're sent to live in the city below, as long as you behave, and because if you don't, Bynarr sends you to the surface and you die very quickly.
Yeah. There's the
Ah.
element for the foreground.
Yeah, because they pull back in the final shot of the episode for The Devil You Know, and Apophis has taken over, so you see more of the palace in the foreground.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly right. So again, it was the same way that we did the moon with a plate in the background and then a 3D pull through, a 3D render in the foreground. Oh, that's Serpent too. There it is.
There you go. That episode launched Gate World.
Oh, really?
Yep. There was no Gate World before Jolinar's Memories, the first half, and Peter Williams takes his helmet off, reveals that he's not Neonak, but he is Apophis, and Darren Sumner went and set up the first version of Gate World that night. He says, because he was a web designer at that point. He says, I've got to create this, pay homage to this with a website online, and that's what he did. And it's going to be 25 years. Is it going to be 25 years old this October? So, isn't that wild?
It is, actually. It really is.
Yeah.
The show was really popular, wasn't it?
Yeah. And but the point is you inspire people, with your art, because art begets more art. Some of it good, some of it not so good, but it's just the creative process. So Kent, this has been really cool, and I look forward to having you back to explore more, because there's so much here in those early years of SG-1 that you guys established, not just for the rest of the franchise, but techniques that the industry continued to evolve from. This is really cool.
Thanks for having me.
That was Kent Matheson, matte painter for Stargate SG-1. I really appreciate his insight into this particular area of artistry where the show is involved. There are so many pieces that make what we see on screen come to life, and I really enjoyed his perspective on the show. Hoping we'll have him back to explain a few more shots that you haven't seen before, or that you haven't seen in this kind of level of detail, because we definitely didn't get to all the ones that I wanted to talk about. So there's more to come. Before we go, if you enjoy Stargate and you want to see more content like this on YouTube, click the like button. It makes a difference with YouTube and will continue to help the show grow its audience. Please also consider sharing this video with a Stargate friend, and if you want to get notified about future episodes, click subscribe. And giving the bell icon a click will notify you the moment a new video drops, and you'll get my notifications of any last-minute guest changes. And clips from this episode will be released over the course of the next few weeks on the GateWorld.net YouTube channel. My thanks once again to Kent for making this episode possible. I love talking with the artists from the show. These guys are just absolutely fantastic. My appreciation to my moderating team, Summer, Tracy, Anthony, Jeremy, Marcia, for making this possible. Frederick Marcoux at Concepts Web, our web developer at Dial the Gate. Bryce Orrs, Matt Wilson, Eagle SG. I don't make the show in a vacuum, and churning out these episodes week after week, especially one like this when I'm technically away from the keyboard, is a privilege to do for you guys. So I appreciate you so much. Check out dialthegate.com for all the upcoming episodes. We've got a number of them heading your way this season. My name is David Reed for Dial the Gate. I'll see you on the other side.